Virgo, pull up a chair. Anna here, and this is Virgo. And before anything else, I need you to understand that what I am about to describe is not the kind of luck that falls out of the sky. It is not the luck of the lottery or the lucky accident or the right place at the right time with no explanation attached. What is gathering around you right now is something older and stranger than that. Something that has been assembling itself in the dark for longer than you have been paying attention, and now it is ready to be seen. Take what resonates, leave what doesn't. If something in your bones already knows what I am pointing at, stay close and subscribe because we are only just beginning to understand the size of what is opening for you. Let's walk into this together. There are doors that cannot be forced. You have probably tried, most people do. They stand at a particular threshold, one that seems like it should open, that feels like it ought to open, that every reasonable piece of evidence suggests should have opened by now, and they push, they knock, they find another angle, another approach, another reason it should yield, and sometimes it does. And sometimes it simply stands there, solid and indifferent, offering nothing but its own closed surface back to whoever is pressing against it. What almost no one understands is that the doors that will not be forced are not always locked. Sometimes they are simply not yet ready, not in the passive sense of waiting for external permission, but in the alchemical sense, in the sense that certain combinations require time to complete themselves, that certain reactions cannot be rushed, that the transformation happening inside the door, in the dark space where no amount of pushing reaches, is itself the preparation for the opening. And the opening, when it finally comes not because force was applied, but because something finished. You are standing at the other side of a finishing, not one thing. A convergence of things, several long processes arriving at their conclusions around the same stretch of time, overlapping in a way that is neither coincidence nor design, but something in between. Something that happens when a person has been moving in a consistent direction long enough that the universe of cause and effect begins to return what was sent. Luck. Let's talk about that word honestly, because it deserves more than it usually gets. In the shallow understanding, luck is random. It is the coin landing on the right side, the right name pulled from the right hat, the universe distributing its gifts with the blind indifference of weather falling on whoever happens to be standing in the right spot, with no reference to what that person has done or built or carried or become. Whew. But there is another kind of luck, older, less discussed, the kind that the ancients understood differently, not as randomness, but as alignment, as the condition that emerges when the interior of a person and the exterior of their world arrive at the same moment, at a correspondence, when what someone has become is precisely what the current configuration of their circumstances can receive and reward. This kind of luck cannot be manufactured, but it can be prepared for. It grows in the soil of a specific kind of living, the kind that keeps faith with what is true even when the returns are slow. That builds in the dark without the confirmation of visible results, that refuses stubbornly and often quietly to become something other than what it is in order to receive something faster. That is the luck now gathering around you, not falling from the sky, rising from the ground. From everything you planted in the seasons when the ground was hard and the light was thin and there was very little visible evidence that anything was taking root. Something took root, more than one thing, and the roots, unseen and unhurried, have been going deeper all this time. There is a quality the luckiest eras of a life share that is almost never named in the celebrating of them. They arrive quietly, not with trumpets, not with the unmistakable sensation of a door swinging open and light flooding through. They arrive more like the shift from one kind of weather to another, gradual then sudden, with no precise moment you can point to and say, there, that was it. That was the exact instant everything changed. You may already be inside this era without having recognized it as such. The recognition tends to come later in retrospect, looking back at this particular stretch of months from a vantage point that makes the shape of it visible in a way the interior of it never quite allows. From inside a turning point, it often feels like ordinary life, like Tuesday, like the same questions and the same uncertainties and the same imperfect navigation of an imperfect world. But something is different. Something in the texture of what is possible has shifted almost imperceptibly, but genuinely. Doors that stood solid are showing the faintest line of light at their edges. Conversations that stalled are finding new breath. Opportunities that seem to belong to someone else's life are suddenly appearing in yours with the casual familiarity of things that were always meant to be there. Notice this. Not with grasping disturbs the very thing it reaches for, but with the particular quality of attention that a tracker gives to fresh signs in the earth. Still, focused, unhurried, reading what is there rather than projecting what is hoped for. There are three currents running through what is opening for you, and they move through different parts of your life, but they draw from the same source. The first is recognition, not the recognition of being famous or celebrated or broadly known, though those things may follow in their own time and in their own form, but the recognition of being seen correctly, of the people and circumstances that matter encountering the version of you that is most true and responding to it as what it actually is, rather than what is convenient or comfortable for them to see. You have spent time, perhaps significant time, being misread, being placed in categories that did not fit, being valued for things that were real but not the most real things. And the particular exhaustion of being consistently misread is one that accumulates slowly and quietly, like sediment, until you are carrying a weight you may not even be fully aware of anymore because you have been carrying it for so long. That weight is beginning to lift. The misreading is beginning to correct itself, not because you changed, but because something in the quality of your presence has become too clear to misinterpret. The truest version of what you are has grown too vivid, too solid, too undeniably itself to be casually categorized as something lesser. The second current is convergence. Oh, there are threads in your life, things you began, skills you developed, relationships you cultivated, knowledge you accumulated that have been running parallel for a long time. Separate streams, each valuable in its own right, each moving in its own direction, at its own pace, not obviously connected, not pointing toward any single visible destination. Something is beginning to pull these threads together. Not all of them, not dramatically, But there is a convergence happening, a moment approaching where several things that seemed unrelated begin to reveal their relationship to each other. Where a skill from one corner of your life turns out to be precisely what was needed in a completely different corner, where a connection you made years ago quietly becomes the key to something you are building now, where the seemingly scattered landscape of your accumulated experience begins to resolve, like a photograph developing in a dark room into an image that was there all along but required the right conditions to become visible. This convergence is the engine of the luck. It is what makes this era feel to those watching from the outside as though fortune is simply falling your way. What they cannot see is the years of accumulation that made the convergence possible. What looks like luck from the outside is architecture from the inside. Your architecture, built in the dark, room by room, without knowing quite what the finished house would look like. You are beginning to see the house. The third current is permission, and this one lives entirely inside you. There is something you have been waiting to want out loud, something you have held at a careful distance, not because you do not know it is there, but because wanting it fully, declaring it clearly even to yourself, felt like an exposure that the current state of your life could not yet support. Like standing in front of a window that faces the wrong direction, all the light would come in, yes, but so would everything the light reveals. The luckiest eras of a life are almost always preceded by a moment of internal permission, of finally allowing yourself to want what you want without the elaborate qualification system you have developed to make the wanting seem smaller, safer, more reasonable to whoever might be watching, including yourself. That moment of permission is either approaching or has already arrived, so quietly you may not have registered it as the significant threshold it is, but it is there. The sense that what you want is no longer something to be managed or apologized for or translated into something more palatable. The sense that you are at last available to your own desires in a way that makes their fulfillment not just possible, but genuinely, structurally likely. Now, the shadow side of all of this, because there is one, and leaving it unspoken would be dishonest. Every opening brings with it not just what enters, but what it requires you to release. Every era of expansion has its particular ask the thing you cannot carry through the new door, because the door was not designed for it. There may be something you are holding a story about yourself, a version of your own limitations that you have been living inside for long enough that it no longer feels like a story. It feels like the walls, like the actual structure of things, rather than a temporary shelter you built during a season when you needed shelter. The luckiest era of your life cannot fully arrive while you are still living inside that story. Not because the universe is withholding it as punishment for misbelief, but because the story and the era occupy the same space, because you cannot simultaneously hold yourself as someone to whom great things do not happen and be someone to whom great things are happening. The belief and the reality are not separate. They are woven from the same thread, and which one dominates determines which one is visible. This is the work. Quiet, invisible, absolutely essential, not positive thinking, something more rigorous and more honest than that. the examination of what you believe about what is available to you, the willingness to find the places where the ceiling is self installed rather than structurally imposed. And then carefully, without violence toward yourself for having needed the ceiling when you built it to remove it. The clover grows in the cracks. Oh, this is the image that belongs to this reading, to this particular quality of luck gathering around you. Not a manicured garden with everything in its designated place. Not abundance delivered in neat, predictable forms on predictable schedules, but the stubborn, persistent, quietly extraordinary fact of green life emerging from the hardest ground. From the places where nothing should be growing, from the cracks and the edges and the forgotten corners where the light arrives at strange angles and something decides to grow anyway. Your luck has that quality. It is not coming in the shape you may have originally designed for it. It may not announce itself as luck when it first appears. It may look, in its earliest form, like a small thing, an unexpected conversation, an offer that seems almost too straightforward after so much complexity. A door that opens without resistance in a corridor where every other door required everything you had. Pay attention to the easy openings. This is counterintuitive. We are trained to be suspicious of ease, to treat frictionless progress as evidence that something must be wrong. But sometimes the ease is simply the correct fit, the right key in the right lock, the particular click of alignment between who you are and what is being offered. Trust the click. Here is where I want to leave you, not with a summary, not with a list of what to do or expect, but with a single image to carry forward into whatever comes next. Imagine a night sky, dense, dark, the kind of dark that has weight to it, that presses slightly against the skin, that makes the edges of things uncertain. And in that sky, not the clean, bright full moon of celebration, but something earlier than that, a sliver, a crescent, just enough light to suggest the shape of what is coming without revealing it fully. That is where you are. Not in the full brightness of an era already realized, but in the crescent stage where the shape of something enormous is just barely traceable in the dark, where the light is thin but unmistakably present, where what is coming is already casting its first edges against the night sky of your life, visible to anyone who has learned to see in the dark. You have learned to see in the dark. So look up. The luckiest era of your life is not arriving. It is not on its way. It is already here in its crescent form, in its first thin light, in the quality of possibility that is gathering around you in ways that will make sense only later, when you are standing in the full brightness of what this was always becoming. The clover is already growing in the cracks. You just have to stop looking at the cracks long enough to see the green.